That is the Eagles, Hotel California, and that huge guitar riff that you hear on Hotel California. That is Mr. Don Felder doing that, and we are excited, happy, tickled to death to have Don Felder on the phone with us. Don, thanks for calling in. Thanks for joining us today.
Hey, Richard, it's my pleasure, and thank you for taking the time to do this interview. I appreciate it.
Well, I thank you for calling in. I know you're a busy, busy man. Are you looking forward to coming to Kentucky for the Bourbon Festival this Saturday and Sunday?
Absolutely. You know, I love playing in the South. Anytime I can get close to the South, I'm delighted, especially Kentucky and that whole part of the Bourbon and Beyond Festival. As a matter of fact, I'm going to be doing a cooking event there with one of the chefs. They asked me what I wanted to cook, and being from the South, the only time my father would go into the kitchen was to cook fried oysters. My mother wouldn't touch them. She thought they were nasty and slimy. So he would go in and cook fried oysters, and I loved them, and I'd eat them every time we're anywhere they have them on the restaurant. But I thought that would be a good opportunity for me to learn from a proper chef how to cook good fried oysters. So that's what I'm going to be doing as one of the events here when I'm there at the Bourbon and Beyond Festival.
Now, when you retire from music, you could probably open your own oyster restaurant, maybe.
Well, the only thing wrong with that sentence is retire from music. You know, I don't think I'll ever do that until I physically can't do it. I've done it since I was 10 years old. It's been the one mistress in my life that's never betrayed me. Always there, brought me so much love and joy in my life that I have a hard time even thinking about stopping.
Now, we have heard your guitar work on many, many, many songs. Of course, we just played the classic Hotel California, which I'm sure you've played at least 1,000 times. How do you get to be a great guitarist? I'm thinking practice, and more practice.
Well, the key is to really just be in absolute obsession mode with what you're doing. You don't do it for the money. You don't do it for the fame. You don't do it for the girls. Well, maybe for the girls, but you don't do it for any other reason than you just absolutely love playing guitar. And I grew up dirt poor in the South on a dirt road, and that was my just obsession. I loved doing it. We didn't have video games, or actually the only game we had in the house was Monopoly, and so I spent all my time, free time, instead of doing homework and all that sort of stuff, was playing guitar. And so it wasn't something that I was made to do, that my parents said, oh, we need to give you music lessons. First of all, they didn't have the money, and second of all, there was no music school, so I just had to figure it out by myself, and my whole life I've just been obsessed with it and spend every free minute and every day that I've got playing guitar. That's what I do. I love it.
So did you come from a musical family? Did anybody else in the family play an instrument?
No, not really. My father had a great music appreciation. He used to like Tommy Dorsey, Glenn Miller, all those big bands, you know, and so he would come home from work and put on a record and sit there and just have this relaxed, joyous look on his face. And I don't know if it was because I saw how much joy music brought him, and in order to please your parents, sometimes you do things that please them the most. And so he actually encouraged me and helped me get some early guitars, and taught me how to solder my own cables and things like that. So he was a great encouragement. But other than that, no one in my family or my family history has had a musical streak in their life.
Now, I also read that you can tell me this is true or not. You purchased your first guitar at the age of 10, and you traded some cherry bombs for that. Is there any fact to that?
That is the truth, yeah. I had my favorite uncle who lived up in North Carolina. We were up there, my brother and I, and he had a bunch of cherry bombs. He snuck a box of them into the trunk of my dad's car as we were leaving and told us not to tell my dad because my dad was afraid we'd blow our fingers off, and he was probably right. So anyway, when we got back, we would go out on rainy days when we had ditches full of running water and throw these cherry bombs in them, and they would drift downstream into these big culverts and then explode inside these culverts. It sounded like a big cannon going off. So So the kid that lived across the street came running out one day and wanted some of those cherry bombs, and I'd been over playing his house a couple of times. I'd seen the part of this guitar sticking out of the top shelf of his closet, and I said, well, I tell you what, I'll give you some of these cherry bombs. If you go get that guitar, we'll swap them. So he gave me this thing. It had a big crack in the front of it, and I think it was missing 3 strings, and I had no idea how to tune it. And the drugstore used to sell guitar strings, black diamond guitar strings. So I saved up 1 string at a time to get the missing strings to put on that guitar. And there was a guy a couple of blocks away that taught me how to tune it and showed me a few chords and taught me the song Wildwood Flower, and I was gone. So after that, I had an instrument, and my dad helped me upgrade to a silver tone. And then he actually bought a little Fender Duo, Sonic, I think it was, from a girl whose dad had bought it for her for Christmas, and it hurt her fingers, and she didn't want to cut her nails, so it was practically brand new. And he bought it, that and a little tweed champ amp, and brought it home, and I was just in heaven.
And when you were 15, this is awesome to me because, like, when I was 15, I'm still, playing games with my friends and maybe riding the bicycle. At 15, you're starting a band called the Continentals.
Yep.
And would there be any, bootleg singles out there that people might be able to find in an obscure record shop or something from the Continentals, you think? Did you ever put anything down?
No, we never recorded anything, but that first band, Stephen Stills was in that band with me, and he was in the band for almost a year and then took off for California, and Bernie Ledden showed up right after Stephen left and kind of replaced Stephen in the band. And then we changed the name of the band from the Continentals, which sounded kind of like an old 50s rock band, to the Mondi Quintet. And we kind of had an English slant to it. But, yeah, that was one of my first bands, was the Continentals with Stephen Stills.
Did you do a lot of covers in the Continentals, or did you practice writing some material?
Well, we did 1 or 2 originals, but typically most of the gigs we played, which were like fraternity parties and bars and that sort of stuff, wanted dance music, songs they knew and loved and could get down and do the gate or two at these university parties.
And another thing that I've been reading on your bio, and I thought this was awesome, you gave guitar lessons to a very young, teenaged Tom Petty. Tell me about that.
Well, Tom grew up, I think, a couple of years behind me. Stephen Stills, myself, and Tom Petty all went to the same high school. And I think he was a couple of years behind me, and I was working in a music store after high school, teaching guitars, selling guitars, doing anything I could to earn money to buy guitars or amps or strings or whatever I needed. And he came in one day, and he was playing bass in this band called the Epics, and they had 2 guitar players, both of which were horrible. But he was playing bass and wanted to start playing guitar, so I started teaching him there in the store, and then went over to his house a couple of times and taught him at his house, went to a few of their rehearsals and tried to sort their guitar players out, so one would play rhythm and one would play lead when Tom wasn't singing, and kind of put a little organization into their arrangements. And then I wound up moving to New York, and Tom kind of stepped in behind me into the free concerts at the University of Florida on Saturday and Sunday on the gardens there, and his band started playing the same circuits at Dub Steer Room, which was a bar, steakhouse, and the fraternity parties, and just all those gigs that were around there, and I was gone. And so we reconnected over at Don Henley's house, years later after his first album came out, and it was at Henley's birthday, and I walked in, and there's little Tommy Petty sitting there at Henley's house.
Wow.
So we reconnected years later after we all wound up out in California.
Now, when you're working with Tom Petty, and even in the Continentals, when you were working with Stephen Stills, did you see the potential? Did you see them being these superstars they ended up to be?
No, we were just a bunch of kids we had sort of an unspoken challenge that who was going to be the best band, whether it was in a battle of the bands, and it was always the Allman Brothers. It didn't matter if it was the Allman Joys or the Spotlights or whatever they were calling themselves that week. They were the best band in North Central Florida, bar none. And so we were always striving to be as good, if not better, than the Allman Brothers in singing and playing. Dwayne was just unbelievable. He was the guy that taught me how to play slide guitar after seeing him play it a couple of times at this bar over in Daytona Beach. And anyway, nobody had any idea. We just really had this kind of competition going on to be the best band, the best players, the best musicians, and just kind of one push the other and push the other. And it's kind of a remarkable thing. It reminds me, I did an interview with Smokey Robinson, and he came out of that whole Detroit scene where Stevie Wonder with Fingertips Part 1 and 2 and Diana Ross and all the people that came out of that Detroit scene, which was a remarkable number of people that came out of one little area like that. Gainesville, for some reason, seemed to be very similar in that it produced Tom Petty, Stephen Stills came out of there. The Allman Brothers were there in the summer. Just Leonard Skinner was in Jacksonville. It was myself with just a bunch of people that went on to become platinum-selling rock and roll Hall of Fame artists came out of that one little place in North Central Florida. So none of us had any idea. We were just doing what we loved and was having fun doing it.
How many guitars would you say you own? You may have to estimate because you may not be able to count them all. And do you have a favorite guitar, one that means a whole lot to you?
Yeah, I think my favorite guitar is my original 59 Les Paul Sunburst that I bought in Texas years and years ago in the early 70s, and it was one that I played on the road. I played it on one of these nights on the Border record, on Hotel California. Pretty much every Les Paul recording that I played in the studio was on that guitar, and it still sits in my locked up locker here in my studio, and take it out and use it it's like embracing an old lover, you never forget the feeling of their kiss.
Do you play any other instruments besides guitar?
Yeah, I play mandolin, 5-string banjo, pedal steel. I can claw my way around piano a little bit, but that's about it. As far as other instruments, that's it.
Now, I guess most people remember Don Felder as a legendary guitarist from the Eagles. Can you tell me how you got into the band, how that worked out?
Well, Bernie and I, like I said, Bernie replaced Stephen Stills, I think, when we were 16. And I think I was 15. He was a little bit older. He had a car and a driver's license. I was still riding a bike when I first met him. And we became friends and worked down there for years, made records together and toured together, went to New York together. Sid Bernstein brought us up to New York and auditioned us for a bunch of stuff. And so we wound up being really good friends, and then he moved back to California and tried to get me to move to California, but I had another band, and I was moving to New York because I had a record deal up there. And so he kept calling me, whether he was with the Flying Burrito Brothers or whatever band he was in, and he finally called me and said, hey, I'm in this new band called the Eagles, come see us. And I think they were actually opening for Yes at this Boston University VU auditorium. So I went down to see my friend, and every time he would come through, we'd hang around and play country music backstage or a couple of guitars and just jam like we always did. And I was in the dressing room backstage at Boston University playing with Bernie, and Glenn came over, and I was playing slide guitar, and he went, oh, my God, that's great. You are amazing. So when I finally moved to L.A., I would go out and hang out in their rehearsal halls, just become friends and hanging around, talking with Bernie. I think I slept on his floor when I first got to California, so he helped me out. He was the only guy I knew in California when I arrived. And then I got a call. They wanted me to come in and play slide guitar on this one song on The Border. And so I went in with my little Les Paul and little Tweed Deluxe and sat up and played there for about 45 minutes or an hour like any other session. And everybody was happy with it. And I went home, packed up and went home. And the next day I got a call from Glenn asking me to join the band. And I was delighted with the invitation and accepted it graciously. Went back into the studio that day and wound up playing on Already Gone and some other tracks that they were working on, and just became a member of the band pretty much from that one session.
That's another question I had about your guitar playing. You have these, of course, we mentioned the great guitar work you do on Hotel California, One of These Nights, Already Gone. Do you already have the guitar licks, the guitar parts that you've already got down and you're looking to put those into a song, or do you hear the song and then add the guitar onto that? How does that process work?
Well, typically, when I was in New York, I was in a jazz fusion rock band, where it was a rock band that played long, extended, free-form jam solos. And I learned and developed the ability to improvise, which really proved out to be a really great skill and talent for me, that I could walk into any session and listen to the track once and then sit down and make up parts and play solos and introductions and just create stuff like improvising. As a matter of fact, the introductions to the acoustic version of Hotel California that I did on nylon string guitar were just made up on the spot. Henley at Soundcheck, we were getting ready to film that night, and he said, Hotel needs a really special introduction. Come up with something. So I went, okay, and, kind of said, okay, you guys play this chord, and I'll diddle around, play this chord, and I'll diddle around. And the next thing I know, we're on stage filming for MTV, and we made 2 takes. We filmed the show twice, and one introduction was just a little better than the other one, and that became the introduction that everybody knows on that acoustic version of Hotel. And it was just made up on the spot, just me improvising. And so I probably, unless I sat down and learned it again right now, I wouldn't be able to play that introduction again, because it was just something that happened in a moment.
Eagles' greatest hits, 1971 to 75, which you were a vital part of, recently certified 38 times platinum, and has overtaken Michael Jackson's Thriller as the best-selling album of all time. That's got to make you feel good.
Yeah, nobody expects that sort of stuff. If you look back of all the recording artists over the decades that have happened, maybe over the last 100 years, and you look at the Stones and the Beatles and, my God, Michael Jackson and Stevie Wonder, all these amazing artists that made records, and that record is now the biggest-selling album of all time, and actually Hotel California album is number 3, the 3rd biggest-selling of all time, and it's just such a breathtaking recognition when I heard about that it's just nothing but a great honor to have received something. I have been part of something, those gifts that it took, that magical combination of playing and writing and producing and all the work we put into making that career together, and to have that kind of acknowledgement is really just a fantastic feeling. You're right. And, 2 out of 3 of the biggest selling albums of all time ain't bad.
Also member of the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. That's got to be a deed and honor for you.
Yeah, it's really one of the honors that every artist looks forward to. And I think you have to have been 25 years since your first release to be eligible for that. So, a lot of the artists that have releases in their 20s and 30s are all in their 50s and 60s by the time they become eligible for that recognition. And it's not an easy thing to be able to be elected and voted on by your peers in the business. It's not not a public vote, by your peers in the industry, and be recognized by those people that are previous Rock and Roll Hall of Fame members, as well as members in the industry of Rolling Stone magazine and record companies, and people that acknowledge you that way. So it's probably one of the highest honors you can receive, you know.
Now, not only are you a great musician and maybe an up-and-coming chef with your oyster recipes, we'll wait and see on that, but a best-selling author. Heaven and Hell, My Life in the Eagles, one of the best sellers in the New York Times. Is it, I know for me, I would have trouble remembering all these things that happened many, many years ago. Is it a pretty lengthy, taxing process to remember all these events and put them into a book?
You know, I didn't start out to write a book. I started out after I left the Eagles wanting to get a good, clear understanding of where I'd come from, you know, very humble upbringing and, you know, dirt road with a white clapboard house with a tin roof on it to winding up in, you know, the magnitude of success that I was dragged into, and what changes had happened to me as an effect of being exposed to all of that, and get a good, clear understanding about all that before I went forward. So I started doing these daily meditations where I'd sit down for 15 to 30 minutes, very first thing in the morning before the light was up, and I'd do these meditations on specific areas of my life, my childhood, my high school years, my, you know, moving to New York, and really just kind of went through the process of my life in an attempt to recall an understanding of that long trip I'd been on. And as I came out of these meditations, I'd write longhand down on these legal pads these recollections. And then they finally got transcribed into word processing form, and I could look back and clean them up and, you know, edit them and kind of develop them. And so finally my at that time fiancé decided that she was going to, unbeknownst to me, sit down and read all these things, which she did, and came to me and said, you know, this would be a great book. And I said, you know what? I failed 9th grade English and had to spend summer in summer school while everybody else was going to the beach and the swimming pool making up my 9th grade English class. I can't write a book. She said, no, these stories are amazing. And so she introduced me to Michael Ovitz, who had a publishing literary department at the time. And next thing I know, I'm coming back from New York, and I've got 5 offers to publish a book that I haven't even written, just on some of my stories, and forced me to sit down and learn how to become an author. And it turned out to be, you know, quite the cathartic experience for me to go back and relive my life. As a matter of fact, I'd recommend that to everyone that does that when you hit 50 or 60, go back and remember everything about your life and write it down for your children and your grandkids and generations to come. And so it was a very healing, very cathartic experience for myself, and I'm really glad I went through it and did it.
Well, let's talk about Bourbon Beyond this Saturday and Sunday. Going to be in Louisville, and you're going to be with a lot of artists. I would love to be a fly backstage with all that talent. But if people come out to the Bourbon Beyond Festival, which we encourage them to do, and Don Felder hits the stage, tell me what they can expect. What's a Don Felder show like?
Well, I play a lot of songs that I co-wrote, recorded, toured with the Eagles for 27 years that I was in the band. A lot of Eagles hits that go from everything from Hotel California to Heartache Tonight to Life in the Vast Lanes, Already Gone, and some of the earlier, softer stuff that we did live, Take It Easy, Tequila Sunrise, Peaceful Easy Feeling. So it kind of covers the gambit of the Eagles' greatest hits, Volume 3, I guess you might say. And then I do a little tribute to Stevie Ray Vaughan. I play one of his songs called Pride and Joy. It gives me the chance to just play the blues and not have to stay so restricted to the parts in the Eagles song. I play a couple of songs, one heavy metal from the animated movie I wrote the soundtrack for, the soundtrack title soundtrack, and then a song or two from past solo projects. And everybody knows every word to every song that I play, and by the end of the set, everybody's got their phones out, filming Hotel California, been up dancing and singing along with me for almost the whole show. So anyway, it's a delightful, fun evening, and we can't wait to share it with you guys.
Great. We're looking forward to seeing you, too. When you're not performing, when you're not recording, what do you like to do in your spare time? You like to hunt? You like to fish? Like to hike? What are some other things other than music you like to do?
Well, the key words in what you just said are spare time. That's something I just don't have very much of. As a matter of fact, this next week after the Bourbon Festival and Beyond Festival, I come back and I get to go to Montana for 5 days, and I'm going to go fly fishing, play some golf, hang out with some friends of mine up there on a 4,000-acre ranch, and just have a good time and relax. Leave the phone and the computers and the guitars and everything behind, and try to breathe some clean Montana air and enjoy the big sky. So that's about as close to free time as I get.
Now, one question I was going to ask as we conclude the interview, I think you already answered. You've been doing music for years and years and years. I was going to ask, do you see yourself retiring? You said that you really don't have a timeline to retire. It's just whenever you think it's time. So,
whenever it stops being fun. See, there's so many parts of what I do. I get to be a creative director. I get to walk into a studio where there is not a note playing and blow breaths of air and life into an idea musically, lyrics and guitar parts and arrangements, and just paint with an open stroke of music that I want to play, I want to paint. And then I get to do that writing and recording and producing in the studio. I get to go out and play live in front of thousands of people, which have a great deal of enthusiasm and enjoyment for me to do that. I think I have as much fun, if not more, than the people who come to the show, to tell you the truth, doing it. So as long as it's fun and I'm having a great time doing it and enjoying it, I will continue. And when it stops being fun, I'll stop.
And we hope you never stop. We want to keep seeing more Don Felder projects coming out, too.
Yeah, we'll have a new one out after the first year. Within the first quarter, there will be a new CD.
And people want to see Don Felder this weekend, Bourbon and Beyond Festival. Just go to bourbonandbeyond.com for all the lineup and ticket info. And going to be a great show. And Don, again, I appreciate you so much calling in. I know you're a busy man, but I have followed the Eagles for many, many years, and your career too. This is indeed an honor for me. I am on cloud 9 right now speaking with you, and I just thank you so much for taking the time to call in and talk to us.
Well, I appreciate you taking the time yourself to do this for me. As you know, I thank you for doing this. I enjoy talking to the press and having a good time, and especially people that really appreciate the music. So it's been my pleasure. I'll see you at the festival, and come by and have some oysters.
Okay, I'll try those. Thanks, Don. Thanks for calling in.
All right, thanks. I'll talk to you later.
Don Felder, legendary guitarist from the Eagles. Man, what a pleasure.